The question for Warren and Charlie is how companies can balance short-term profits and long-term defensibility while building competitive moats, with examples like Google and Amazon. What advice can they give to CEOs?
Well, the answer is to control your destiny, which we've been able to do at Berkshire. So we feel no pressure from Wall Street. We don't have investor calls. We don't have to make promises. We get a chance to make our own mistakes and occasionally find something that works well. But we recognize that the people in this room and people like them are the ones that we're working for, and we're not working for a bunch of people that care about whether we meet the quarter estimate or anything. So we have a freedom that we get to use, and we're interested in owning a wonderful business forever. Well, there aren't very many wonderful businesses, but we do learn a lot as we go along. Charlie and I have often mentioned how we learned so much when we bought See's Candy, which we did. But we learned when we bought Ben Rogers' chain of women's dress shops spread all over the eastern part of the country. We learned when we tried getting into the department store business back in 1966, and as the ink was drying on our purchase price, we realized we'd done something dumb. We're learning all the time how consumers behave. I'm not going to be able to learn the technical aspects of businesses, but that'd be nice if I knew it, but it isn't essential. And we are obviously we've got a business at Apple which is larger than our energy business, and we may only own 5.6 or 7%, but our ownership goes up every year. And I don't understand the phone at all, but I do understand consumer behavior. And I know how people think about whether to buy a second car. I know how they go out to different. We own auto dealerships. We're learning all the time from all of our businesses how people react to granimals versus, selling them something else. And so See's was a sort of breakthrough, but we just keep learning as to more about how people behave and how a good business can turn into a bad business, and how some good businesses can maintain their competitive advantage over time. So we don't have some formula. Berkshire people, but we can also tell in 10 seconds whether it's something of interest. I mean, when I get these calls and we want to send decks and all that sort of thing, which is nonsense. I mean, it's a bunch of guys sitting that get paid for drawing up these projections of the future and everything like that. If they knew the future, we don't know the future, but we do know certain kinds of businesses. We know what the right price is, and we know what we think we can project out in terms of consumer behavior and consumer and threats to a business, and that's what we've been about, and that's what we'll continue to be about. We don't get smarter over time. We get a little wiser though, following it over time, and you can do it while sitting in the office with a telephone.
Buffett states that Berkshire Hathaway has control over its own destiny as they have no pressure from Wall Street. The company does not have to make promises or meet quarter estimates, providing the freedom to make their own mistakes and find something that works well. Berkshire Hathaway is interested in owning a wonderful business forever and has the opportunity to use the freedom that they have to achieve this goal. He explains that Berkshire Hathaway is interested in owning wonderful businesses forever. Although there aren't many wonderful businesses, the company learns a lot as it goes along. Buffett and Munger have often mentioned how they learned so much when they buy businesses such as See's Candy, Ben Rogers' chain of women's dress shops, and tried getting into the department store business. Berkshire Hathaway learns how consumers behave and how a good business can turn into a bad business or maintain their competitive advantage over time. Buffett states that he does not understand the technical aspects of businesses, but he does understand consumer behavior. Berkshire Hathaway learns how people think about buying a second car, how they go out to different auto dealerships, and how they react to different products like Garanimals. The company uses these knowledge to understand consumer threats to a business and project out in terms of consumer behavior. Hathaway focuses on owning businesses that they understand and can project in terms of consumer behavior and threats. Can you share some major mistakes in both investing and in life that we should learn to avoid, given your annual shareholder letter, which stated Berkshire journey of continuous savings commanding the American tailwind and avoidance of major mistakes, and your past admission of making many mistakes, including some major ones?
Charlie said the major mistake you can make, then you're lucky if you're in the United States. If you go around the world, you don't have a lot of choices in some places, but you should write your obituary and then try and figure out how to live up to it. That's something you get wiser on as you go along. The business mistakes, you just want to make sure you don't make any mistakes that take you out of the game or come close to taking you out of your game. You should never have a night when you're worried about investing. I mean, assuming you have any money to invest at all, and you should spend a little bit less than you earn, and you can spend a little bit more than you earn, and then you've got debt, and the chances are you'll never get out of debt. I'll make an exception in terms of a mortgage on your house, but credit card debt, we're in the credit card business big time, and the world will stay in the credit card business. But why get behind the game? And if you're effectively paying 12 or 14 or whatever percent you're paying on a credit card, you're saying I'm going to earn more than 12 or 14% of money, and if you can do that, come to Berkshire Hathaway. So it's I hate to say this when Charlie's around me, but it's straight out of Ben Franklin. I mean, and it's not that complicated, but I'll give you a couple lessons. So, Tom Murphy, the first time I met him, said two things to me. He said, always tell someone to go to hell tomorrow. Well, that was great advice then. And think of what great advice it is when you sit down at a computer and screw your life up forever by telling somebody to go to hell or something else in 30 seconds and you can't erase it. And you haven't lost the option. And he said, praise by name, criticize by category. Well, what makes more sense than that? I mean, who do you like that criticizes you all the time? And you don't need to vilify anybody to make your point on subjects of discussion. And then I'll give you another general piece of advice. I've never known anybody that was basically kind that died without friends. And I've known plenty of people with money that have died without friends, including their family. But I've never known anybody. I've seen a few people, including Tom Murphy Sr., and maybe Junior, who's here, but certainly his dad. I never saw him. I watched him for 50 years. I never saw him do an unkind act. I didn't see him do very many stupid acts either. I mean, it wasn't that he was non-discriminating. He just decided that there was no reason to do it. And wow, what a difference that makes in life. Charlie?
So simple to spend less than you earn and invest shrewdly and avoid toxic people and toxic activities and try and keep learning all your life, et cetera, and do a lot of deferred gratification because you prefer life that way. And if you do all those things, you are almost certain to succeed. And if you don't, you're going to need a lot of luck. And you don't want to need a lot of luck. You want to go into a game where you're very likely to win without having any unusual luck.
I'd add one more thought, too. You need to know how people can manipulate other people, and then you need to resist the temptation to do it yourself.
Oh, yes, the toxic people who are trying to fool you or lie to you, who aren't reliable in meeting their commitments. The great lesson of life is get them the hell out of your life.
Yeah.
And do it fast. Do it fast.
One of the most basic and important principles for financial success is to spend less than you earn. This allows you to save and invest for the future and avoid accumulating debt. Surrounding yourself with toxic people and engaging in toxic activities can be detrimental to your life and well-being. It's important to recognize these negative influences and remove them from your life. Delaying immediate pleasure for long-term gain is a key element of success in life. By practicing deferred gratification, you can achieve your goals and build a better future for yourself. Lifelong learning is essential for personal growth and success. By constantly learning and expanding your knowledge, you can adapt to changing circumstances and make informed decisions. Being kind and avoiding unkind acts can make a big difference in your life and the lives of those around you. It can lead to strong relationships and a positive reputation. Manipulating others may provide short-term benefits, but it can ultimately harm relationships and reputation. It's important to recognize how people can manipulate others and not to do so yourself. In investing and in life, avoiding major mistakes is crucial for success. This means being vigilant and making informed decisions, and being willing to admit and learn from past mistakes. Can you comment on the emphasis and successful use of properly aligned incentives at Berkshire Hathaway?
What we really hope to find is managers who love their business but don't like a lot of what comes with it as a public company. I mean, if they have to spend a lot of time listening to people tell them what to do about this or that, and they can't afford to irritate them, or they have to go along with their trade association because, or what, whatever they may call it, because you don't want to look like a free rider, and then there's all kinds of things, compromises that people have to make in most jobs. And Charlie and I solved that problem. I had 5 bosses in my life, and I liked all 5 of them, and 2 of them were just huge factors in making my life better, but I liked all 5 of them. A couple of them were, some people here, J.C. Penney, Cooper Smith, I worked at 75 cents an hour, and I love working at Penny's. Well, I didn't love working at Penny's, but I love working for Cooper Smith, and it was 75 cents an hour. But I had to do what they told me to do, which was to sell men's shirts first, then men's clothing, then children's clothing, and so on. And I loved working for the newspaper, and I had a great manager when I was at University of Nebraska. Got to work for Ben Graham. I mean, everything worked out, but there's nothing like working for yourself. And if you can't own a big company, working at Berkshire Hathaway, or running a company, is the closest thing you will get. You don't have to spend time courting analysts who you probably have contempt for, in many cases. You don't have to spend time with banks, getting money, and particularly in terrible times. Yeah, there's all kinds of, you get a lot in the way of freedom that I would think would be meaningful to me, and it might be better if you own the whole place yourself, but maybe you've got siblings that want out. Maybe there's a million reasons why you may not be able to achieve that unless you sell to Berkshire. And that's easier probably if you have a family business where people want to go in different directions than it is with a public company. But there's still possibilities there. So that's why I think if I owned a public company and it was worth great many billions of dollars, and Berkshire Hathaway wanted to buy it, and the shareholders were willing to vote it, I would, considering the way I would feel about life. For one thing, I wouldn't want to retire at 65. I'd want to keep working, and there are reasons to sell to Berkshire, which Charlie and I, in certain positions, if we were on the other side, would take the deal. But it isn't for everybody. Charlie?
I think we have it pretty good, Warren. We've been very lucky, and I don't know. It seems to me that most of the people who are going to end up the way we did, they almost already know how to do it.
Well, the most important purchase in retrospect that we may have made was National Indemnity, not because specifically what it did, but what it led to. And Jack Ringwald controlled the company. And I knew him and liked him, and he knew me. And once a year, he'd get irritated when the Nebraska Department of Insurance or somebody would come around, and he said they always came around when the exorbitant racetrack was open, so they could. I mean, he had all these theories about why it was a pain in the neck to be regulated, and I told Charlie Hyder, next time Jack is in that mood where he's ready to sell just because he's tired of fooling around with all these guys, be sure and find him. And so Charlie called me one day and he says, Jack is in the heat. And I said, bring him over. And we made a deal. Well, that's why Jack sold. And he was happy after he made the deal. And I was happy after we made the deal. So there's a man that controlled the business, but just decided these people didn't seem to bother him as much once they were my problem and not his. And you just can't tell when lightning will strike. And that didn't do magnificent things for us initially, but just look at what it led to, and then, so you never, if you knew how you were going to, if you knew how you were going to shoot all 18 holes, it wouldn't be any fun playing. You wouldn't get on the first tee. I mean, it's the uncertainty, the fun of playing the game, the opponents, all kinds of things that make a game interesting. And I think Charlie and I are in the most interesting game in the world.
Buffett and Munger explained that Berkshire Hathaway seeks out managers who love their business but may not enjoy all the aspects that come with being a public company. Berkshire Hathaway provides these managers with significant flexibility, allowing them to make decisions independently and without the need to court analysts or banks. This autonomy and freedom is meaningful to these managers, and it is one of the significant benefits of working at Berkshire Hathaway. They emphasize that owning a big company provides two central benefits: direct benefits as the company grows through your equity, and autonomy. Working at Berkshire Hathaway offers the closest experience to owning a big company, as managers have a significant amount of freedom to run their business independently. While it may not be the same as owning the entire business yourself, it is still a valuable and rewarding experience. They also spoke about the fun of playing the game at Berkshire Hathaway. It's a sense of uncertainty and excitement that comes with running a business, and it offers a challenging and rewarding environment to play in. For Buffett and Munger, it is the most stressful game in the world, and they believe that it offers a unique and enjoyable experience for managers who are passionate about their business. There is a concern that after Warren Buffett's passing, his philosophy of holding a lot of cash and US Treasury bills may be disregarded by potential corporate raiders or groups who may take control of Berkshire Hathaway and make changes to how its subsidiaries are run. Do Warren and Charlie share this concern?
Well, I think it's fair to say we think about it plenty, but I don't worry enormously. If we, it is true that Greg and the directors will have a honeymoon period for a long time simply because of the votes that will still remain. I mean, but it's true that eventually they will get judged based on how well our operation fares versus others. Now, if we don't pay any dividends in 12 or 15 years, you're talking $1.5 trillion that it would take to take over, and I think if we can't. That limits the group. They like to think about how much they can borrow against it. It doesn't work when you and some of these. There's nobody that can come close to doing it themselves. And I think that the important thing is that Berkshire be regarded as a national asset rather than a national liability. We've got to be a plus to the country, with our form of operation. And we certainly have got a record which will then be 12 or 15 years longer, done with much more capital, more companies, more things will have happened where our hundreds of billions can work its way into the economy in terms of lots of jobs, lots of products, lots of behavior, and it can be compared with other things. So I think we went out if we deserve to win out, and I think the odds of that happening are very, very, very high. Charlie?
Well, I don't spend much time worrying about something that's going to happen 50 years ago and after I'm dead. I think if you sort of take care of each day's responsibilities pretty well and think ahead as well as you can, then you just take the results as they fall. So I'm philosophical about it. But I'm not. I think he's fretting unnecessarily.
Okay. Neither one of us are worried, basically. But we plan. We do plan, and you know, I've got a model in my mind of what Berkshire has been. That model's it's been modified plenty of times over 58 years. The one thing I knew initially or very quickly, was it shouldn't be a textile company. That was an important decision, and we've just played the hand as it come along, and we made a few really good decisions, and we'll never make a decision that kills us. The only things that are a threat to the planet, we don't have any answer for those. But we keep ourselves in better shape than anybody else. And we just aren't going to have big maturities of debt that come along. We aren't going to have insurance policies that can be cashed in en masse, and we will sit with what looks like a huge amount of capital, and it is a huge amount of capital, but there's a huge amount of earning power, there's a huge amount of diversity, everything. So our business model will be graded, and it'll be graded against a whole lot of people that we'd like to be graded against. So I think we're handing something very secure over to the future, and I think we've got the shareholder base like nobody has. I mean, there isn't anybody in the country that I know of, unless they've had an employee-owned company prior to going public or something of the sort. But this is the product of 58 years of regarding the shareholder as the owner of the company. But what does that mean? That means having happy customers. It means being welcomed by your community rather than having them turn you away. It means that the government feels better with you if there's a financial crisis because you can provide something that actually the country can't under some circumstances, and you'll be there. And at the same time, it'll be good for the business. And we will have crises of one sort or another, but if they aren't challenging the planet, which worries you in terms of some of the threats that we have, we'll be a plus to the United States, and if we're a plus to the United States, we'll survive. Okay.
Buffett believes that Berkshire Hathaway should be regarded as a national asset rather than a national liability, and that its operation should be a plus for the country. He believes that Berkshire's success should be measured not just by financial performance, but by how much it benefits society through job creation, product development, and economic growth. Although there are concerns about what will happen to Berkshire Hathaway 50 years in the future, Buffett and Munger are not overly worried. They focus on taking care of each day's responsibilities and planning ahead as best they can. They believe that as long as they keep Berkshire Hathaway in good shape and avoid major threats to the planet, the company will continue to thrive. Buffett and Munger believe that Berkshire Hathaway's success is due to its business model of avoiding major risks and maintaining a strong financial position. They do not take on large amounts of debt or insurance policies that could be cashed in mass. They also don't have an answer for major threats to the planet. Instead, they focus on diversity, earning power, and long-term stability. They believe that shareholders are the true owners of the company and that Berkshire Hathaway's success is measured by their satisfaction. They focus on keeping shareholders others happy by providing excellent customer service, being welcomed by the community, and being seen as a positive force in society. They avoid decisions that could harm shareholders in the... What is your opinion on the business model of big banks and regional banks in the aftermath of the events at Silicon Valley Bank? And how does the perceived implicit guarantee of all deposits affect both types of banks?
I can say this, if you follow sound banking methods, which means not doing some things that other people do, a bank could be a perfectly decent investment. In fact, Charlie and I, well, me originally in 1969, we bought a bank at Berkshire, and we had $19 million invested in that bank, and we had $17 million, I think, invested in our insurance companies. And if the Banking Holding Company Act of 1970 hadn't been passed, we might have ended up owning a lot of banks instead of a lot of insurance companies. We were looking at more banks, and Harry Keefe was taking us around Chicago, and there were other things we could do. And then, bingo, they passed the 1970 Bank Holding Company Act, and we had to divest ourselves of that bank in 10 years. Which,
by the way, it never had a bad debt.
Oh,
it never had an unnecessary cost. It made nothing but money with no risk. It never presented any deposit insurance risk to the government.
Zero.
It was a lovely, sound, constructive institution in this community, and any person who really deserved credit could get credit.
And we were going to buy more banks.
We were forced out of it.
And we were going to buy more banks. And if we bought more banks, we probably wouldn't have expanded the insurance business. But, the law changed, and so we divested, and we've done okay in insurance. But banking was more attractive to us. It was bigger, and there were more targets to buy. And you could run a perfectly sound bank then, and no negotiable certificates of deposit, all these things, all the inventions that came later, and you could still run it today, and you could earn a lot. You could earn good money, very good money, and we would have found more banks, but we're precluded from doing that. And we sold bank stocks in the last, well, we sold them first when the pandemic broke out, and then we sold some more in the last 6 months. And we don't know where the shareholders of the big banks necessarily, or the regional banks or any are heading. I've got my bank, I've got my own personal money, and I'm probably above the FDIC limit, and I've got it with a local bank, and I don't worry about it in the least. But in terms of owning banks, events will determine their future. And you've got politicians involved. You've got a whole lot of people who don't really understand how the system works. And I would say that you've had something less than a perfect communication between various people and the American public. So the American public is probably as confused about banking as ever, and that has consequences. And nobody knows what the consequences are, because every event starts recreating a different dynamic. I mean, in physics, you know that pi is going to be 3.14, infinite number of numbers after that. But no matter what happens, but you don't know what has happened to the stickiness of deposits at all. It got changed by 2008. It's gotten changed by this. I mean, and that changes everything. And so we're very cautious in a situation like that about ownership of banks, and we do remain with one bank holding a deal but we originated that deal, and with the Bank of America. And I like Bank of America. I like the management, and I proposed the deal to them, so I stick with it. But do I know how to project out what's going to happen from here? The answer is I don't, because I've seen so many things in the last few months which really weren't that unexpected to me to see, but which reconfirmed my belief that the American public doesn't understand our banking system, and some people in Congress perhaps don't understand it any more than I don't understand why the spaceships go up. I mean, there's all kinds of things I don't know about. But if you're in Congress, you take a position on everything, and sometimes it's to your advantage, if you really understand it, not to say exactly what you feel. And here we are. Charlie, yeah.
Well, a lot has happened in banking in my lifetime. I welcomed all that early banking of the deserving immigrants by the early Bank of America. And I think all the credit cards, when they came in as original bank cards, were a great contribution to civilization. But the gamier it gets and the more it looks like investment banking, the less I like it as a citizen. I am deeply distrustful of situations in which everybody wants to get rich and envies everybody else. I regard that atmosphere as utterly toxic.
And to people who like one story, which is, again, a true story, and I'm not naming the name, and it wasn't Pete Jeffries, because he might fit this name, but it wasn't Pete. But our hero, Gene Abegg, was going to have to retire at some point. And so we hired a future replacement. It's kind of a little the problem I talked before about having the perfect business, and now we're going to bring in somebody. We actually bring in somebody that went to Central High with Charlie. Although
my class.
Yeah, and Charlie didn't know I was picking out this guy, and he wasn't.
If you'd asked me, we wouldn't have hired him.
Well, if I asked you, I probably wouldn't hire anybody, but that's another question.
If a bank follows sound banking methods, it can be a profitable investment. Berkshire Hathaway originally bought a bank in 1969 and had $19 million invested in it, which was a profitable investment until the Banking Holding Company Act of 1970 was passed, requiring them to divest within 10 years. If the act hadn't been passed, they may have expanded into owning more banks. Buffett believes that the American public doesn't understand the banking system, which can have consequences. He believes that there is a lack of communication between people and the American public, leading to confusion. The future of banks is uncertain and unpredictable, as events and politicians can change the dynamics. Buffett believes that owning banks can be risky due to the unpredictability of events, and he is cautious about bank ownership. The stickiness of deposits is unpredictable, and it has changed in the past due to events like the 2008 financial crisis. This can impact the future of banks and make it difficult to predict their success. Despite his caution about bank ownership, Buffett likes Bank of America and proposed a deal to them. He remains with one bank holding deal, which he originated, and is sticking with it. He likes the management of Bank of America and has confidence in them. Amidst the pandemic, we observed supply chain shortages, particularly from Asia, prompting companies to relocate production with political considerations. Should companies have the liberty to make such decisions, or is it appropriate for the government to support them in their efforts?
Obviously, it's logical if you're in business and you can make the thing in Mexico way cheaper. It's natural to open a factory in Mexico and get your parts cheaper, and a lot of the auto manufacturers have done exactly that. On the other hand, nobody wants to hollow out the whole country so all the manufacturing jobs are elsewhere and we're all living like a bunch of farmers, like English colonies in 1820 or something. And these ideas are, of course, in big tension. We don't have that much foreign production, right, Warren?
Yeah, well, but we've lost. Well, originally Berkshire Hathaway is a textile manufacturer. It lost because the South became feasible versus the North, and of course then eventually
the South got expensive compared to China.
Sure, and society benefits, and some people get killed in that sort of a situation. And a rich society should take care, one way or another, and of people that worked in our shoe factories, people who worked in our textile companies. I mean, if you worked in our textile operation in 1964, when we took it over, half our workers only spoke Portuguese. And they weren't getting great wages at all. But now you could do it in the South, and we were doomed to go out of business. And it wasn't the fault of the worker in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't our fault. We kept trying to compete.
Well, it was a TVA had cheap power down there.
Sure.
And textile is really congealed power.
And air conditioning changed everything, but the heat in those damn places were impossible. That's a lot of things. But then it moves offshore in many ways, and net, the country is better off because of it, but it displaces a lot of people who really can't do something else in life. You can't talk about retraining somebody that's 55 or 60 and speaks only Portuguese and really tell them they're going to have a great future in New Bedford, Mass. So you don't want to be glib about it. And we can afford to take care of those people. And we've got some systems that work reasonably well, but there's a tension between, what about the person that doesn't do anything and all that kind of stuff. So these are not easy problems to solve, but I would say that by and large, we want the whole world to prosper. We do not want to be we don't want the United States to be a country of extraordinary prosperity and have the rest of the world
starving.
No, it isn't going to work, and it particularly isn't going to work in a nuclear world. So, and you have your own feelings about it as a humane person, but it doesn't. It is not. It can be done better, and we've got the resources to do it. I mean, the output of this country, what can be done with a lot fewer people and doing more specialized things. And of course, it has been. The work week in the United States, in my lifetime has dropped dramatically. And people still feel busy and everything. It will be the human lot to say, how can I get all these things done? But my mother didn't drive 3 kids anyplace. I mean, you want to go anyplace, if you were lucky and when you got old enough, you had a bicycle. The world just keeps looking at everything moving up as becoming sort of a base that leaves them somewhat dissatisfied. And with our prosperity, we can do a lot of things we couldn't do in 1930, and including taking care of people that get displaced by the fact that somebody else can do that work and improve their lot in life. And we got to make sure that we have the best system that takes care of the people who get displaced by that. But doing that in a political system we have and everything, we'll make a lot of mistakes along the way, but we got to keep moving in that direction. And
really interesting thing about it is that Adam Smith was right, that the free market capitalism automatically, with a lot of property in private hands and free trade and all that, automatically creates GDP per capita that grows and helps everybody, including the people at the bottom. Helps everybody a lot. But inherent in the process, there's a lot of pain in that free market capitalism. For instance, to the Portuguese workers in a textile company in New Bedford. And nobody's ever figured out how to take all the pain out of it. We do have government safety nets to take some of the pain out. We make those safety nets a little bigger as time goes by. But apart from that, if you try and take all the pain out, you'll also take all the gains out of it. You won't have a growing GDP per capita. You'll have an economy like Russia's, which has been characterized as saying they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work.
Yeah. Yeah, the other systems haven't worked better, but it also produces more and more disparities in wealth, and people that do nothing but get assets under management without actually performing anything extra make fortunes. And I mean, it's the job of government to keep the best aspects of capitalism while not causing people that only speak Portuguese suffer in the process. I mean, the two aren't compatible politically over time, and we stumble along making progress on things like Social Security and all that, and we are a lot better off than we are when I was born.
Net, the United States has done a very good job of this tension between capitalistic growth and a growing social safety net. We can be pretty proud of our country looking backward.
Yeah.
Under free market capitalism, businesses compete with each other to sell goods and services, which leads to economic growth and an increase in the country's GDP. This growth benefits not only the wealthy, but also those at the bottom, as businesses create jobs and increase wages to attract workers. The competitive nature of free market capitalism means that businesses that cannot compete are forced to shut down, resulting in job losses for workers in those industries. This pain is a natural part of the system and cannot be avoided entirely. Governments can provide safety nets, such as unemployment benefits and job retraining programs, to help workers who have been displaced by the system. However, if the safety nets are too generous, it could create a disincentive for workers to seek new jobs and could lead to a decrease in economic growth. While safety nets can help alleviate some of the pain of job displacement, it is important to develop a system that helps workers transition to new industries and retrain for new jobs. However, this is a complex problem that requires significant resources and innovation. As a wealthy country, the US has the resources to provide for its citizens and should strive to create a system that benefits everyone, not just the wealthy. Additionally, the US should work towards creating a global economy that benefits everyone, including developing nations. Please explain Berkshire Hathaway's recent investment in Activision Blizzard and the reason for reducing or selling its stake if it has. What do you think about the ABK merger with Microsoft?
Well, I think in terms of what we do with stocks, we don't give information except when required to, which is in the 13F or whatever we file. And there's certain things you can actually figure out by looking at our 10Q, which we filed this morning, but you have to look pretty hard. But I would say this: I think Microsoft has been remarkably what's the word? Willing to cooperate with governing bodies, and I mean, they want to do the deal, and they've met the opposition, it seems to me, more than halfway. But that doesn't mean that it gets done if a given country, in this case the UK, wants to block it. They're in a better position to block it than the United States, but just the way the world works. And that doesn't get solved by offering more money, or so it I don't know how it turns out, but if it doesn't go through, I don't think it's through any shortcoming by either Microsoft or Activision. But not everything that should happen does happen, and well, we ran into it when we bought, made the deal with Dominion Energy 18 months ago, and that they let us buy a good bit of what we wanted to buy, and then the U.S. government in effect said, you can't buy something else, which I think we would have done a better job with than anybody else did, and which the states involved did not object to it, which the customers didn't object to it. But you don't take on the United States government, and you try and figure out things that you won't have a problem with. And I think in that case, the U.S. government made a mistake. I think the British government's making a mistake in this case, but that's life in the big cities, sure, I would say. And what we do will depend on a lot of things. Charlie?
Well, I think what we do, you kissed that one off beautifully.
Buffett explained that they only provide information about stocks when legally required to, while information can also be found in 10Q filings it may not be easy to find. Buffett notes that Microsoft has been willing to cooperate with regulators, but it ultimately depends on the regulator's decision. In this case, the UK regulators have blocked the acquisition and it may not get approved. He also mentions that offering more money may not necessarily solve the problem. Buffett discussed how the US government prevented Berkshire Hathaway from buying something they wanted, even though it would have been beneficial for everyone. He believes that the British government is making a mistake in blocking the ABK acquisition, but sometimes governments can make mistakes that prevent good deals from happening. Buffett notes that what Berkshire Hathaway does with its stocks will depend on various factors. They are flexible and adapt to changes in the market and regulations. Please could you share with us some stories about Mr. Label and Mr. Jane that highlight their leadership qualities and character which we may not have heard before?
I'll start out with the G. He walked into the office in 1986, and I'd gotten the bright idea of going into the reinsurance business, I think in maybe 1969. So I'd stumbled along for 17 years, and I had a wonderful guy that ran it, but he also liked certain brokers, and I mean, he was running it the traditional way, the top quality and everything else, but he fell into he didn't try and change the system. He tried to improve the system, and to some degree, and we went nowhere. 17 years wandering around in the wilderness, and I thought I knew we could have something good. And then Ajit came in on a Saturday, and Mike Goldberg had steered him in, I think, and Mike deserves to be enshrined in perpetuity for that act. And I talked with him a while. I think maybe I was opening the mail on Saturday while I talked with him, and he had absolutely zero experience with insurance, but he'd actually seen a good bit of how corporate America operated because he'd been in management consulting. And after talking with him, I knew I'd struck gold, and so I hired him and gave him the backing of some money. And we had a very good period in the market, almost right away for him to act. And Ajit, if I had the top pick of 10 insurance managers in the world, I could take all 10, and they wouldn't. You can't replace Ajit. And we still enjoy talking. We don't talk as frequently as he used to, but we used to talk about every day. But he's one of a kind, and if they're going to stick around long enough, you only need one of a kind. Paul Andrews stuck around at TTI, had all the money in the world. Every time I talked to him about getting a raise or something of the sort, he said, "We'll talk about that next year." He was not what you get when you get the top draft picks from the leading business schools. And I will say this, I have never looked at where anybody went to school in terms of hiring. I mean, I just, somebody mailed me a resume or something, I don't care where they went to school. And it just so happens that Ajit went to some pretty good schools, but he isn't Ajit because he went to the schools.
Warren Buffett explains how he had been struggling with the reinsurance business for 17 years and had been unable to find a way to make it successful. That is, until he hired Ajit Jain. Despite having no experience in the insurance industry, Jain had previously worked in management consulting and quickly proved himself to be an invaluable asset to the company. Buffett attributes much of the success of the reinsurance business to Jain and believes that he is irreplaceable. He also emphasized in the interview that he has never looked at where someone went to school when considering hiring them. Instead, he focuses on the individual's character, talent, and work ethic. In fact, he notes that some of the best employees he has ever hired did not come from prestigious academic backgrounds. This approach has served him well in the past, as evidenced by his success in hiring Ajit Jain, who did attend good schools but was ultimately hired for his unique character and abilities rather than his educational background. Can you share your 100-year vision for Berkshire? This is a question directed to both Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger, considering your tribute to Benjamin Graham in which you mentioned the idea of plant trees that others will sit under.
Yeah, I would like to add one thing about Ben Graham. Ben Graham did all kinds of things for me, and he never expected one thing in return. I mean, just, you name it, and he did it, and there wasn't any hidden, or a hint, I should say, of anything he expected in return. And I checked. Well, he wrote a book in 1949 that, in a sense, said to me in very persuasive terms that what I'd been spending the previous 8 or 9 years working at and loving was all wrong. And that book has been, I check it every now and then on Amazon to where it ranks. And Amazon ranks hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books by sales. And Ben Graham's book has been up there like number 300 or 350 or something like that forever. And there isn't any book like it. I wrote HarperCollins a note the other day because they're bringing out another edition. And I asked them how many copies have been sold, and they said the records didn't go back far enough, but they had 7.3 million copies of this little book that changed my life, and continues to outsell every investment book. Investment books come along, and they're number 400 or 1,000 or something for a while, and then all of a sudden they're numbered 25,000 or 200,000. And this book, in how many areas can you find any book that has had that sustained position? You go back and look at number 1 in 1950 or number 2 or number 3, and you look at it in 51 and 52, they don't continue. I mean, they just don't continue. Cookbooks, maybe 1 or 2 of them last for a while, but there is nothing. And this book lives on, and everybody keeps bringing out new books and saying a lot of other things, but they aren't saying anything that's as important as what he said in 1949 in this relatively thin little book. So, our vision for Berkshire is exactly what we said today. We want it to be a company that is owned by its shareholders and behaves in a way that society is happy that it exists and not unhappy. And we will have unlimited capital. We'll get lots of talent. And we've got a base that can't be beat. And there's no reason why it can't be perpetuated, just like Ben's book, and maybe be an example to other people. And if so, we'll be very happy. Charlie?
Yeah, one of the really interesting things about Ben Graham, he was a really gifted teacher, a very honorable profession. And that is what has lasted. However, an interesting fact that he was sheepish about in his old age was that more than half of all the investment return that Ben Graham made in his whole life came from one stock, one growth stock, Geico, Berkshire's subsidiary. And at the time he operated, there were a lot of sort of lousy companies that were too cheap, and you could make a little money floating from one to another. But the big money he made was one growth stock. Buying one undervalued great company is a very good thing, as Berkshire has found out again and again and again.
Buffett discussed the significant impact that Ben Graham's book, The Intelligent Investor, had on his investment philosophy. He explains that the book convinced him that his previous investment strategy was wrong, and its persuasive argument had a profound effect on him. The book has been consistently popular over the years and continues to outsell every other investment book. Buffett credits Graham for being a mentor to him, doing countless things for him without expecting anything in return. Both Buffett and Munger agreed they want the company to be owned by its shareholders and behave in a way that society is happy it exists. They aim to have unlimited capital, lots of talent, and a base that can't be beaten. They hope that Berkshire Hathaway will become an example to other people and can be perpetuated just like Ben Graham's book. While discussing Ben Graham's investment philosophy, Munger notes that Graham made most of his investment returns by buying one growth stock, Geico, which is now a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway. Munger believes that this is an essential lesson for investors, as buying one undervalued great company can be a better strategy than just jumping from one cheap company to another. Berkshire Hathaway has also found this to be a successful strategy over the years. How can one deal with negative people who happen to be family members when avoiding them is not an option, as you have both acknowledged that the most challenging problems in life are usually related to people?
You minimize it. But you can't, there's no question about it. And Charlie gave an answer I thought was a master of tact the other day when he says you always ought to interact with people who behave well. He says, of course, you have to make some exceptions in your family. But but it's true. And, you really, I don't know what it's like to have, a drunken, bullyish, probably father, but parent just generally. How do you handle it? It's very interesting that the MacArthur family, the very famous John MacArthur, the man who set up the MacArthur Foundation, he had 5 kids, and 4 of them turned out to be superstars of one sort or another, and they had this crazy itinerant drunken father, but they all decided that the thing to do was to get the hell out of the house. So you had the father of the MacArthur Foundation that did that along with 3 of the siblings out of 5. So, I was lucky. Charlie was lucky. If you have our father saw plenty of shortcomings in both of us, but it would still be there for us. And if you have one that won't be there for you, it's a very tough problem. And I think one way or another, I probably would have gotten through that if I had that situation, but I think my life would have been a lot different.
Buffett acknowledged that negative people can have an impact on one's life. He believes that negative people should be minimized. However, it can be difficult to stay away from negative family members. He acknowledged that it can be difficult, citing the example of the MacArthur family where the children chose to get out of the house to avoid their drunken father. Buffett believes that one way or another, people can get through such situations. He considers himself and Charlie to be lucky to have a supportive father who was there for them despite their shortcomings. He believes that if someone has a family member who won't be there for them, it can be a tough problem to deal with, and their life may be affected as a result. What prompted Berkshire Hathaway to sell almost all of its substantial position in Taiwan Semiconductor, which it acquired a few months ago, worth close to $5 billion, citing geopolitical issues as the catalyst despite the absence of any apparent changes in these issues?
Taiwan Semiconductor is one of the best managed companies and important companies in the world. And there is not, and I think you'll be able to say the same thing 5 or 10 or 20 years from now. I don't like its location, and I've reevaluated that. I don't think it should be any place but Taiwan, although they will be obviously opening up chip capacity in this country. And actually, one of our subsidiaries that we got in Allegheny is participating in their Arizona construction activities, but it's a question of we would rather have the same kind of company, and there's nobody in the chip company, there's no in the chip industry that's in their league in our bit, at least in my view. And the man that was a 91-year-old or so that connected with it, that I think I played bridge with, and in Albuquerque, and marvelous people, marvelous company. But I'd rather find a marvelous people. I won't find it in the chip industry, but marvelous people and marvelous competitive position and everything. I'd rather find it in the United States. I feel better about the capital that we've got deployed in Japan than in Taiwan. I wish it weren't so, but I think that's a reality, and I reevaluated that in the light of certain things that were going on. Charlie?
Well, my view is that Warren ought to feel comfortable if he wants to.
Yeah. Put that in the minutes. Okay, station 10.
Buffett praised Taiwan Semiconductor as a top-tier company that is unmatched in the chip industry. He believes it is a company with excellent management and a strong competitive position, and he thinks it will continue to be a major player in the industry for years to come. He acknowledged that Taiwan Semiconductor is an excellent company. He says that he doesn't like its location. He believes that companies based in the US are a safer investment because they are subject to US laws and regulations. He also believes that Berkshire Hathaway has deployed more capital in Japan than in Taiwan, and he feels more comfortable with that decision. He emphasizes the importance of finding companies with great people and a competitive advantage. He believes that the company's management team is a crucial factor in its success, and he places a high value on businesses with a unique and sustainable competitive position. He also notes that Berkshire Hathaway is involved in the construction activities of Taiwan Semiconductor's Arizona subsidiary, indicating that he is still invested in the chip industry, but just not in Taiwan.
Cheaper. It's natural to open a factory in Mexico and get your parts cheaper, and a lot of the auto manufacturers have done exactly that. On the other hand, nobody wants to hollow out the whole country, so all the manufacturing jobs are elsewhere, and we're all living like a bunch of farmers, like English colonies in 1820 or something. And these ideas are, of course, in big tension. We don't have that much foreign production. Right, Warren?
Yeah, well, but we've lost, originally Berkshire Hathaway is a textile manufacturer. It lost because the South became feasible versus the North, and of course then eventually
the South got expensive compared to China.
Sure, and society benefits, and some people get killed in that sort of a situation. And a rich society should take care, one way or another, and of people that worked in our shoe factories, people who worked in our textile companies. I mean, if you worked in our textile operation in 1964, when we took it over, half our workers only spoke Portuguese, and they weren't getting great wages at all. But now you could do it in the South, and we were doomed to go out of business. And it wasn't the fault of the worker in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't our fault. We kept trying to compete.
Well, it was TVA had cheap power down there.
Sure.
And textile is really congealed power.
And air conditioning changed everything, but the heat in those damn places were impossible. That's a lot of things. But then it moves offshore in many ways, and net, the country is better off because of it, but it displaces a lot of people who really can't do something else in life. You can't talk about retraining somebody that's 55 or 60 and speaks only Portuguese and really tell them they're going to have a great future in New Bedford, Mass. So you don't want to be glib about it. And we can afford to take care of those people And we've got some systems that work reasonably well, but there's a tension between, what about the person that doesn't do anything and all that kind of stuff. So these are not easy problems to solve, but I would say that by and large, we want the whole world to prosper. We do not want to be we don't want the United States to be a country of extraordinary prosperity and have the rest of the world
starving.
No, it isn't going to work, and it particularly isn't going to work in a nuclear world. So, and you have your own feelings about it as a humane person, but it doesn't. It is not. It can be done better, and we've got the resources to do it. I mean, the output of this country, well, it can be done with a lot fewer people and doing more specialized things. And of course, it has been. The work week in the United States, in my lifetime has dropped dramatically, and people still feel busy and everything. It will be the human lot to say, how can I get all these things done? But my mother didn't drive 3 kids anyplace. I mean, you want to go anyplace, if you were lucky and when you got old enough, you had a bicycle. The world just keeps looking at everything moving up as becoming sort of a base that leaves them somewhat dissatisfied. And with our prosperity, we can do a lot of things we couldn't do in 1930, and including taking care of people that get displaced by the fact that somebody else can do that work and improve their lot in life. And we got to make sure that we have the best system that takes care of the people who get displaced by that. But doing that in a political system we have and everything, we'll make a lot of mistakes along the way, but we got to keep moving in that direction. And
really interesting thing about it is that Adam Smith was right, that the free market capitalism automatically, with a lot of property in private hands and free trade and all that, automatically creates GDP per capita that grows and helps everybody, including the people at the bottom. Helps everybody a lot. But inherent in the process, there's a lot of pain in that free market capitalism. For instance, to the Portuguese workers in a textile company in New Bedford. And nobody's ever figured out how to take all the pain out of it. We do have government safety nets to take some of the pain out. We make those safety nets a little bigger as time goes by. But apart from that, if you try and take all the pain out, you'll also take all the gains out of it. You won't have a growing GDP per capita. You'll have an economy like Russia's, which has been characterized as saying they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work.
Yeah, the other systems haven't worked better, but it also produces more and more disparities in wealth, and people that do nothing but get assets under management without actually performing anything extra make fortunes. And I mean, it's the job of government to keep the best aspects of capitalism while not causing people that only speak Portuguese to suffer in the process. I mean, the two aren't compatible politically over time, and we stumble along making progress on things like Social Security and all that, and we are a lot better off than we are when I was born.
Net, the United States has done a very good job of this tension between capitalistic growth and a growing social safety net. We can be pretty proud of our country looking backward.
Yeah.